Jehovah, lumban ya Jehovah.
It was 20 years ago this week that Emma and I and our 4 children landed at Logan Airport. 20 years ago. It was on the first anniversary of 9/11. There were still tanks at Heathrow, and security was pretty tight coming into the country. And I just want to honor all our veterans and all early responders everywhere for their service. I think we were excited coming into the country at that time, but it was certainly with a degree of trepidation, bringing 4 children to live in a foreign land and leaving all our friends and family, leaving the security of a church that we knew and loved. And we really didn't know how things would work out in coming here. But we were trusting God. We didn't come here for a better life. We didn't come here to pursue the American dream. We came because God said go. He said, go, and I will bless where you set your feet. Those are the words I heard him saying to me, and some of you know the story where I was wearing these Converse Stars and Stripes boots at the time, called them my prophetic boots. And I knew that God was taking us to live in America, and at the same time, totally separately, God had been speaking to Emma about the same thing. And so it was 7 years later that the door opened for us to come, and we arrived September 2002. But even then, I knew this wasn't our final destination. Now, don't worry, we're not planning on going anywhere. But you see, the vision that God gave me was for the ends of the earth. Because when I asked God why America, he made it clear to me in a vision that it was to build churches that would release resources for the nations. It was to bless the nations. It was to reach the nations like Oman and Pakistan and Uganda and Nepal and the Netherlands and wherever else God may lead us. And at the same time, we would be enriched by the nations. And we are. Amen? Now, is that just God's call on my life and you're just here for the ride? Of course not. That's his call on your life as well, because it's his call for the church. You see, what is our mission? What does our church exist for other than the worship of God? And we'll come back to that at the end. We exist for God's mission. Listen to theologian Christopher Wright. He says, it's not so much the case that God has a mission for his church in the world as that God has a church for his mission in the world. Mission was not made for the church. The church was made for mission. God's mission. Right? It's God who sets the parameters for our mission because we are his people and we are called to engage in his mission. And what we see in the Bible is that his mission is global. It's to the ends of the earth. Listen, the ends of the earth is not someone else's mission. It's not that organization out there. They're taking care of the ends of the earth. Or that mega church over there, they'll handle the ends of the earth. No, it's our mission. It's the mission of every church. Listen to what God says to his people when his people that he calls his servants in Isaiah 49. He says this, he says, it's too small a thing for you to be my servant to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach where? To the ends of the earth. He was saying, if your vision is just for your own tribe, it's too small. If you just want to bring salvation to your own people, your vision's too small. Because I've called you to be a light to the nations. My salvation must reach the ends of the earth. And that wasn't just a word for Israel. It applies to the church, to all of us. Because this is the very verse that the Apostle Paul quoted when he set out on his first missionary journey to the nations. He started by going to his own people, to the Jews. In Acts 13, having been sent out from Antioch, Paul and Barnabas went to Pisidia, and it says there that they spoke on the Sabbath to the Jews in the synagogue about Jesus being the Messiah, and they were very well received. But the next Sabbath, it says that almost the whole city gathered to hear their message. So now you had Jews and you had these other nationalities, or Gentiles, as they were known. And the Jews became jealous. They didn't want these Gentiles getting in on it. And so they spoke against Paul. And it was at that point that Paul and Barnabas said, we are now turning to the Gentiles, to the nations. And their justification for doing that was Isaiah 49. This is what he says in Acts 13. He says, for this is what the Lord has commanded us, when he said, I've made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth, quoting Isaiah 49. And it says, when the Gentiles heard this, they began rejoicing. You see, as God said to Isaiah, if your focus, or your mission is just to your own people or your own nation, then you're thinking too small. Because my mission is to the ends of the earth. Right? If our church's ministry is just to the cities that we live in, our ministry is too small. If we're just developing leaders for our own congregations, we're thinking too small. If our budget is just for local ministry, our budget is too small. If our faith is just for a few congregations here on the seacoast, our faith is too small. Can you see? Can you catch the heart of God in this? He says, I've made you a light to the nations. It's what Jesus said to his followers. Remember in Matthew 5:14, he said, you are the light of the world, he says. Now, let's just consider light for a moment. Light attracts. It can repel. There are those who love the darkness, who are repelled by the light, and they want to hide in the shadows. But many are drawn to the light, like moths to a lamp. Some of you know I've got an ornamental pond, and I raise frogs. There's nothing funny about that, Isaac. Got about 20 frogs right now, actually a few more than that. But they hang out. I've got these lights around the ponds, and they hang out near the lights. You know why they do that? Bugs. When it gets dark, some big juicy moth is going to come along, and those frogs are going to have dinner. And thankfully for us, you know, when we are drawn out of the darkness into God's light, our destiny is very different to those moths. And what is the light that attracts? You know, it's not just the good news of Jesus, it's how it's put on display in our lives. It's the goodness of God that people see in us and in our good deeds. That's why Jesus then said in verse 16, he said this, he said, let your light shine before men so that they might see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Right? The light that they're seeing are these good deeds. And what are those good deeds? I would suggest it has a lot to do with how we care for the needy in the world. So Isaiah 58 says this: if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness and your night will become like the noonday. But you see, here's the thing. How will people on the other side of the world who've never heard of Jesus see our good works and be attracted to our light unless we go to them? How can we be the light of the world? Right? It needs us to be sending our own Pauls and Barnabases, or going ourselves to plant new churches, build communities that are going to shine in those nations. That's why it's been such a joy over the years to send out people like the Lindens to Istanbul. 12 plus years now they've been there. Or Daniel and Natalie Baker in Oman. More recently, Alka and Bev to the Netherlands. That's why it's such a joy to have Matt Black here with us this morning. Spent his life serving the Turkish people. A great church there in Izmir until the government asked a number of people to leave. And yet now Matt going for it again, reaching Turks in other parts of the world, in Greece, Turkish gypsies actually, in Greece. When are you going to be leaving, Matt? 28th of this month. It'd be great to pray for you at the end. And I think of Marion and Susie and Narona and others in our church and all that they've accomplished in Nepal over the last 20 plus years, helping the oppressed, caring for the poor, right? They've been a shining light there. And of course, we want to see the churches there go and do the same thing. That's what Sam and Marlene have been doing in Nepal. And they're going again. They'll be going this fall back to Nepal to train believers there so that they can go and reach others in their own country, other villages, other people groups. You see, it's not just us going and being a blessing, it's actually the call of every church. Wherever they are in the world, we are a sent people. That's why Jesus commissioned his church in Acts 1:8, saying, "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." Right? That's the scope and trajectory of our mission. It's always going outwards. It's always pressing outwards to the ends of the earth. Listen to Leslie Newbigin, the great missionary, theologian, bishop. Newbigin said, "The church must be seen as the company of pilgrims on the way to the end of the world and the ends of the earth." Right? We're a sent people, sent to the ends of the earth, and we don't stop. We keep on going until the end of the world. And what is the end of the world? It's when Jesus returns and begins a new world, a new creation. But until that day, you see, we're to be continually seeking to bless the ends of the earth, because anything less than that is too small of a thing. God is saying to us, lift up your eyes to the ends of the earth. Because if we'll set our sights there, then we will never lack his supply. We'll always struggle for resources when we think too small, when we make it about us. The great missionary Hudson Taylor set his own sights on the ends of the earth. For him, that was China. He said this. He said, "Depend on it, God's work done in God's way will never lack God's supply." So, where exactly is the ends of the earth for us? Where does the earth end? You ever thought about that? Where does the earth end? It's like asking, where are the four corners of the earth? Well, of course, the earth is a globe. You think God didn't know that? The earth is a globe and has no end. But that's the point, you see, isn't it? Isn't that the point? That we keep on going. It means that the ends of the earth are just as likely to be across your street as across the sea. The important thing is that we're always going. That we don't stop with our neighbors, rather we invite them to join us on our mission to the ends of the earth. It's neighbors and nations. It's local and global. It's Jerusalem and the ends of the earth. It's Portsmouth and Pakistan. Right? When we pray as we did last week, it's for both. When you give your tithe to the church, you're giving to both. Right? Because that is the mission of God. It's what we've been called to give our lives to. And there is no greater cause that we can invest in than God's mission. But why? This is where I want to end up with. Why? I've talked about who, that's us. I've talked about how, it's by going and shining. I've talked about where, to the ends of the earth. But why? It's because all over the world there are people who are still living in darkness, who God is seeking after. Right? In John 4, Jesus told a Samaritan woman at a well that his father was seeking worshippers. And this woman was living in darkness. But Jesus made it clear that even though he knew everything about her, he cared for her. Any other Jewish rabbi would have shunned her, but Jesus was happy to drink from her cup. He took the time to talk to her, knowing that she was thirsty. She was seeking satisfaction, but in all the wrong places. She'd had relationships with different men, perhaps in a desperate need to be loved, but it didn't quench her thirst. And yet Jesus said, I will give you living water and you'll never thirst again. So she was one of the worshippers that his father was seeking. Because you see, that is where our deepest need, our deepest fulfillment is going to be found. It's in worshiping and glorifying God. It's in loving and enjoying him. The one who created us in his image to know him. I know your name, he says. As we know, the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. So listen to John Piper, because he so rightly puts it this way. He says, missions is not the ultimate goal of the church. Worship is. Missions exists because worship doesn't. Worship is ultimate, not missions, because God is ultimate, not man. When this age is over and the countless millions of redeemed fall on their faces before the throne of God, missions will be no more. It's a temporary necessity, but worship abides forever. Worship is therefore the fuel and the goal of missions. Worship is the why of mission, right? Our mission is to the ends of the earth because all over the world there are still countless millions of people who are living in darkness. They're not worshiping and enjoying the living God, and God is seeking after them because of his great love. He desires their ultimate well-being. He wants to bring them into relationship with himself, a relationship in which they will love and worship and glorify him and find their greatest joy in doing so. Right? Our purpose as the people of God, the reason why we exist, is to worship God, right? To bring praise and glory to his name and to call the nations of the world to join us. Let me close by reading from Psalm 96, verses 1 to 3. The psalmist says, "Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, praise his name, proclaim his salvation day after day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among all peoples. Haven't you ever wondered what it means to sing a new song? You know how worship leaders say to us, come on, sing a new song, and everyone's going, what am I supposed to sing? What does it mean, sing a new song? What are we supposed to sing about? Well, the psalmist tells us here. He says, sing praising his name. Sing by proclaiming his salvation. We sing of his glory among the nations. We sing of his marvelous deeds among all peoples. But you might say, well, hang on, there's nothing new about those things. We often sing his praise and about his salvation and glory and his deeds. That's not a new song, is it? No, but it will be a new song to the nations. Among all the peoples who have not yet heard the good news of Jesus. It's an old song to us, but our old songs will become the new songs that are being sung in the nations that we go to. That's what the psalmist is calling the nations to, you see. But who will share that song with them? We go to the nations to invite them to join us in this song. So, I'm so happy that over the last 20 years of being here, that our focus has been on the nations, our neighbors and the nations. Thrilled at all that is being accomplished here. But there is so much more that God has in store for us, right? That we're to keep on going to the ends of the earth until the end of the world, when the glory of the Lord will fill the earth as the waters cover the sea. Fill the earth not just with light, but with countless multitudes of people worshiping Jesus, living for the praise of God's glory. Amen? Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord a new song.
Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all of the earth. Let it be heard.